Early voting has kicked off in the Texas primary. New restrictive voting laws implemented by the Republican Party are center stage.
Mail-in ballots are being rejected left and right over new ID requirement. At least 38% of mail-in ballots have been rejected so far in Texas' largest county. And election officials and voters are working against the clock to get them fixed. The last day to apply for a mail-in ballot is this Friday, February 18th. The election is March 1st.
Meanwhile, a judge in Texas has ruled a section of the restrictive voting law likely violates the First Amendment. The law makes it a felony for election officials to solicit mail-in ballot applications from voters who did not request an application. A judge has temporarily blocked the rule, but Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton said he will quickly appeal this decision. Joining us now is Alexa Ura. She is a demographics reporter for the Texas Tribune. She has been following this story. Alexa, thank you for joining us. So early voting in Texas doesn't seem to be going so well. Thousands of mail-in ballots are being rejected. What grounds are they being rejected on, and how are election officials dealing with this?
So as part of the new law that Texas Republicans passed last year, we've added new ID requirements to voting by mail, both for the applications and on the actual ballots. You have to include your driver's license or your social security number. But what we're seeing is that voters are really struggling with these new requirements. Voting by mail is already restricted in the state. There are very strict eligibility rules to qualify. And one of those is that you have to be 65 and older. And so we are hearing from voters who have been voting by mail for many, many years and are now, not aware of these new requirements. Some of them use old applications that didn't include the new field. Some of their ID numbers did not match with what was on file. And now as the actual ballots are coming in, pretty high shares of those ballots are missing that ID information altogether. And so election officials are worried that voters are not seeing the ID field where this has to be filled out. And more broadly, they're worried that people won't go through and take that extra step to correct this before the deadline to get these ballots back to election officials. And obviously that puts their actual votes at risk.
Alexa, talk to us about that recent decision by a Texas judge to temporarily block the law that punishes officials for recommending mail-in ballots to voters. What was some of the testimony that led the judge to make this call, and who does it really hurt?
We spent a few hours in the courtroom on Friday, and we heard from the Harris County Elections Administrator who told the judge that she would be in town halls with voters and would have to stop herself mid-sentence in speaking about voting by mail because she feared breaking this new law and being liable for a state jail felony. The idea behind this law was that the AG's office argued was that they didn't want government expenses to be used to push people toward voting by mail. The government prefers for people to vote in person. Ultimately, the judge said that the state had no power to restrict the expression because of its message or its subject matter or its content. The election officials challenging the law said that it violated their First Amendment rights, and at least for now, the judge agreed with them.
So could this injunction then be temporary?
Yes, this is a temporary injunction as the rest of this case plays out. Separate from this case, there are a broader collection of challenges to the state voting law. Those are not going to trial until later this month. But as you mentioned, the Attorney General has already appealed this ruling. And so it now goes to the much more conservative Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which will decide whether this temporary injunction will even stand as the case sort of moves forward through the legal process.
Alex, I don't know if you can speak to this, but do you know generally what voters in this specific county we're talking about are saying? How are they feeling? What's the reaction there?
I think that what we saw pretty quickly, the election administrator say, I am encouraging everyone and even downright soliciting folks to apply to vote by mail if you qualify to do it. The deadline is pretty short. At this point, those requests have to be received by counties by Friday, so there's not a whole lot of time. But I think that there was an initial sort of feeling of celebration, even if the ruling won't give the county a whole lot of time to do the sort of outreach that it could have done otherwise to encourage people to vote by mail.
Alexa Ura, thank you.